if you say sculpture, it's about body in space, and it's about body in public space. And I think if you look back last 40 years, in art, in sculpture, the most important contribution came from, that's my opinion, but it came from women artists. I think we can learn a lot from them, and there is an interesting thing that happened. It was that it took a long time for the recognition of this contribution by women artists towards the field of sculpture. You know, if you think about the career of Louise Bourgeois, of Philida Barlow, of Isa Gensken, they only got their career when they were 50 or 60 years old. So that came very late. There was all sorts of reasons for this. Then you have a new generation with people like Sarah Lucas, Rebecca Warren. I think they added very important things about body in space from their perspective. And there's a new generation now at work, and Lena Henke, I think, is one of them, who adds important new insight into sculpture and into this question of body in space, you know, the exposure of body in public space. So I'm very happy Lena could make it. Lena, thank you very much, and give Lena a warm applause.
Thank you, Daniel. Hey, everybody. Thank you so much for the invitation. I'm super excited to be here today. So I kind of wanted to think about my own practice in relation to today's topic, grace and gravity. My Swiss show I did with Daniel at Kunsthalle Zurich was called An Idea of Late German Sculpture to the People of New York, 2018. My New York show, which is on view at Bartolami Gallery right now, is called Germanic Artifacts and opened last week. I'm a German working in New York City, and I'm going to talk about both shows today and how they talk to each other. Let's start with Germanic artifacts. Usually my interests are with urban planning and city development, mostly in North America. But for this show in Manhattan, I decided to switch the focus around and look back at my own history in Germany. This entrance of Bartolami Gallery, this is the entrance of Bartolami Gallery, and I start the show with the neon sign in the office of the gallery visible to the outside 24/7. This light sculpture spells out my name in Alda, which is the oldest form of runic characters and the foundation of German language, connecting folkloric iconography with my other works inside. They only had 23 letters in the alphabet and even used little branches formed on the ground to communicate before having a written language. My sign subverts mystic, nationalistic usage, and I used quotidian New York City restaurant colors for the design. The show is a product of my research into the rituals of the Germanic tribe circa 300 BC. I am particularly interested in the way that they built their smart but simple architecture, including living places for the animals which they shared. Also, as well as their beliefs in myths and rituals. Because Germanic people were an oral tradition-focused culture and not a written tradition, there are numbers of made-up historical accounts of Die Germanen from Roman sources in particular. I grew up next to the Teutoburg forest, which in ancient times was the site of a larger battle between the Germanic people and Caesar. The most often cited account of Germania is a book written by Tacitus in 98 AD, but the Roman historian never actually visited the Germanic lands. All his information was based on secondhand knowledge. We Germans love a good forest, so you enter the space through this tree alley of cast iron columns, which are indicative of Tribeca. I installed my inverted tree casts opposite the columns, and the material I used for these pieces is usually used for architectural ornaments outside. This is one work, and here you see the detail. My studio is in New Jersey, so the artistic legacy of Robert Smithson and Nancy Holt surrounds me. But I like to work in a very direct way. So after long consideration, the only tree in front of my studio had to be cast in every possible way. This is the left side of the gallery space. This green work in the back is called Der Doppelganger. I wanted to keep all titles in German for this show. The tree split at some point into a double tree. So these casts, hanging horizontally on the wall, the same 14-foot length as the columns, are designed to go against the vertical masculinity in the space's architecture. There's another shot. And then I have the details of the colors and the bent shape. And we're going to the back of the gallery. The roots of the trees were cast into these red pieces, hanging along the last column of the space called Baumwurzel. So my tree was cast in every possible way. The material was bent with the positive space becoming negative. Another detail, one of the red ones. So this is the root which I cast off from the ground. Different color. And now we are in the backspace which I created. I wanted to challenge the verticality of the space in other extended ways. So I copied the architecture of the ceiling window and enlarged it into a slanted wall with inverted doors, citing the Kiriko's non-spaces. Here's another view of it. And we are getting closer to the pigs. Zwei Wildschweine are occupying this show. Die Urmutter, the mother of origin, and her Tochter, the daughter. Thinking of the history of sculpture, female casting, or casting as birth-giving, my Urmutter became the mother mold for the second boar made entirely out of chainmail. So this is the Urmutter, and then this is her daughter. The purple pig is carved in styrofoam by hand, and the chainmail pig was cast from it. I used my imperfect casting system to do that. So these females are larger than life size with bent backs. Half-round shape is a consistent design throughout my whole show. The smallest element in the show are these hoofs, all made from one original clay work. A comic-like Asterix and Obelix tree going into a horse hoof shape, a recurring motif of my work, transforming into some kind of urban wall of bricks, enclosing the shape with it. The original piece was cast in 12 different ways and 12 different materials: clay, wax, bronze, porcelain, just to name a few. I dictate the form into a set of materials and casting like the Romans, copying Greek bronzes into white marble. So here's each individual piece. This is cast in 4-ton, which is this architectural material, which is usually used by architects for ornamental pieces outside. This is fiberglass, cement, bronze, aluminum, rubber, plaster, wax, and resin. Oh, terracotta and white porcelain. Also in the office, I had a leather drawing installed. The burned-in blueprint shows the show once again. Another view of the backspace and the De Chirico wall. So now we are going 1 year back in time to an idea of late German sculpture to the people of New York 2018. This was my largest show to date, and as the title suggests, I'm referring to 20th century sculpture as well as to Blinky Palermo's Ode to New York. For the show, I was able to live in Switzerland for half a year to work at the Sitterwerk in St. Gallen, which has one of the largest material archives and a fantastic residency program. But let's stay in Zurich, where I separated the institution into a kind of archive or a topological machine which activated the space. And besides other concerns, I also thought about production in general, but also in relation to the sculpture's fingerprint. The space was divided by one large wall in the middle of the room. I used it to display an older work on it, my so-called Familienaufstellung from 2017. So this is the drawing on one side, and then this is the other side. A piece consisting of my friends and family members cast into bodies of works from the sculpture collection in Malleable, Germany. I placed them on pedestals which resemble or recall a De Chirico painting from 1924. And I also have some details. So this is a work, a recast work by Ewald Matare, which is showing the new girlfriend of my dad in my Familienaufstellung. On the left side, we have Henri Laurence playing my mom. On the right side, Edoardo Paolozzi playing the new boyfriend of my mother. Willem Lehmbruck, my brother, and Jacques Lipschitz, my father, on the right. On the other side of the room, a set of 3 twin sculptures were on display. Each sculpture is a clone of the other one, so to say. This piece is called Aisha Erkman's Endless Knee, a Brancusi-like representation of a body part. Knees endlessly flipped over one another so that you can't see the sex. The work is movable, so you can push it through your garden if you want to. This piece is called Aldo Rossi's Sleeping Elephant. I'm a fan of his work, but also how Aldo Rossi looks at urban design, not only from a functional perspective, but as a generator of aesthetic meaning, which I find very compelling. Single detail. These 2 guys, called Robert Moses' Mother Drives Through Valleys. My take on the most important city planner of New York, who could not drive a car and is often compared to Baron Haussmann of Second Empire Paris. This is a close-up of the material. All sculptures are lined with brightly colored rubber, some kind of tennis court material which is used to protect urban furniture. So they look a bit like building blocks of a children's playground, activating the physical space of Kunsthalle Zurich as a substitute for a public space or square. And then I added these photos of the studio in so you can have a better view of the size. The size is very important for this series of works, as all pieces are enlarged to the architectural principles according to Le Corbusier's modular standard, standing at 1.82 meters, which is exactly my height too. And besides that, I also wanted to reflect on archival concerns of an institution. One of the sculptures sits on a large shelf. My take on the idea of an endless production or an assembly line, or just when you go to IKEA. The heart of the show was a machine. A large map made out of chainmail moved like an incoming train from one side to the other until it completely fell apart. The motor was coming out of the wall, so the institution became the machine for me in the end. Here's another detail. So to summarize some overlapping concerns of both shows, I thought about sculpture as feminized mold making, jostling with the foundation of architecture, and a tension between the humble ambitions of domestic interiors and the audacity of large-scale urban planning. And I'm going to end my presentation with a short clip I developed with the Swiss Institute 2 years ago. I like to combine the monumental with the miniature. I like to zoom in and to zoom out of materials. I like to activate sculptures. And I'm interested in movement, and I'm interested in weight and dimensions. And I'm interested in the connection to the ground. And that brings me from the white cube into the outdoors and now public spaces. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lena. I have something to say, but first I think I would like to invite the public. If you have questions to Lena, please come forward, ask the questions. It seems to be a tradition that the one up here has to start. So, I start to better understand your work slowly. Because, you know, I like to invite artists of which I don't understand the work, because I'm obviously intrigued by what they do. And by showing and inviting them to Consale, I can think about it in a more extended way. So there's something that you do is this, is a very complicated relationship between autobiography, work, and art history, right? And you explore that, and I was always skeptical about all this. It seems to me that's dangerous territory, but you want to explore that territory. And so narration plays an important part within that. So can you say, for the New York exhibition, it does look like, a story that is unfolding in front of us. And there was one element you didn't talk about, which was the door.
Yes.
What was that element? What did you think about, you know, on that scaffolding, you had this white two things that I thought they were doors.
Yeah. Well, first of all, for me, it's very important that the exhibition has some kind of like start and some kind of ending. And you always think about like, how long will a person spend in the show? You know, 3 minutes or 5, sometimes 10. But I didn't like the space of the gallery. You know, Gordon Matta-Clark used to live in that building, so I felt a lot of pressure. And these cast iron columns, typically for Tribeca, really, really concerned me. And I felt they were so masculine and just, you know, standing out. Same as New York. So I wanted to go against them. And my idea was to build a wall using this, the architecture of the ceiling, and to enlarge the wall. I love to tilt walls, as for instance, at my show I did at Salz, Basel, where I built a New York City water tank on top of the building. So for me, it's very important to play with the dimensions a little bit and tilt them over. So it seemed like the column would all of a sudden like get tipped over by the wall or even grew out of it. And the more I played with it, the less I needed the wall, and I inverted it. So the doors, you can't enter through the doors, but you can enter through the wall, actually. So these kind of like non-spaces, or like, what is the negative space, which was also important when we did our show, right? How do people walk around the sculptures? And in the beginning, I even thought about the chainmail will roll over the sculptures. So I thought about that, I think.
And why would you, so if you were fighting with the verticality of the columns, why would you then take the cast of trees? Because they, you know, they refer to the same type of verticality.
Well, one was placed horizontal, right? So it was going kind of against it. And then the last one, the red one, which were the roots from the ground, I had the feeling I need to pull up the roots and place them back on the city tree or something.
Thank you. So any questions so far? Yeah.
In your title, you refer to Germanic
artifacts.
Germanic artifacts.
Yes.
Or can you say something about this root of your work that you have done?
You mean about the show?
No. What was the link to the Germanic artifacts element?
Yes. I mean, as I said, I grew next to the forest where this very large battle happened, and I got very interested in that. But then I was more interested in the architecture they used to build. So that was important for me. And I think the whole point is how much we don't know about all this in the end.
Another question. Thank you so much for such a beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
I just wanted to ask you, do you work with literature when you work on your shows? Because for me, these artifacts look like artifacts of German magic forests from Goethe, Earl Koenig, Hoffmann, Zeiches, Grimm brothers. I saw so much of this connection. I wanted to ask you, how is your relationship with literature?
A little bit, but not something in particular. I love to read about how architecture creates energy besides reading German literature. So I was very interested in that, like, you know, when the first settlers came and what came first when you see a forest. Do you use the wood to build a house or you make a fire? So I was like, yeah, referring to that a little bit.
Okay, is it okay if I start with?
Thanks. Sorry, twice, I think, during your presentation, you touched on this idea of mold making being a sort of feminine birthing process, and I was just wondering if you could elaborate on that.
Yes, for me that's a very interesting topic to think about. What is the mother mold, you know, and I just fall into that way. So in terms of classical sculpture making, I was always against it because I love to work very direct and very fast, which I didn't do for the latest show with the large pig, obviously. So my idea with the female boar, I wanted to have some kind of Urmutter in the show. I was very interested in boars, not only because, you know, you see them often in German forests, but also sometimes they become domesticized. And when I started to carve this boar out of styrofoam, originally I only wanted to use it as a cast for the second piece to cast the chainmail on. But then I just fall into it and I liked it so much, so I had to have both. And maybe you see that all these pieces, the trees and the pigs, are cast in this halfway shape to like kind of connect to each other to build a circle or something. Yeah, no, but feminized sculpture is a topic which often appear in my work, and yeah, thank you.
My question is more regarding the theme, grace. So what is for you grace or gravity? Can you say something about that?
I mean, maybe I can, for me it's easier to talk about gravity, obviously. As I said, it's very important how the sculpture connects to the ground, these very simple questions. Maybe you saw it in those pieces, these little horseshoes, which usually sometimes grow into some kind of hybrid of architectural model. In this case, they grew into this comic-like tree. And I like to work with the motif of a horseshoe quite often, to use it as a replacement for a pedestal, to put all my ideas in some kind of like shoebox. And then, of course, when I was a student, I dealt with the pedestal question a lot and how everything is connected to the ground. And I started to cast fiberglass early on, and of course then you work with gravity a lot. So I could never have, for me it's very important to connect everything to the ground. And I don't know what I should say about grace. Thank
I
you.
have to say something about grace. So, just when
Say
you were
something.
talking. So I think there's one thing, there you have always this gravity with this, as I said in the beginning, my introduction about sculpture being defined by gravity. But I think there's maybe also one danger that with this idea of gravity and grace, that we become a bit too pathetic, right? And I think that somehow for me the grace of Lena's work is actually, and I mean it as a very positive thing, is this very bold, vulgar thing that we encounter there. So it's a bit a strange thing to say, but I think the grace for me in Lena's work is this vulgarity, this very affirming, bold gesture of just being also having a moment of boldness and vulgarity. So
I like that. Thank you.
A half question now is left. Is that anybody has? This is the last question. Yes, Isabel.
You mentioned De Chirico twice. Can you just elaborate?
Yes, yes. I know there's something with these non-spaces or the negative space I just find so compelling, or also just to dissect the body in architectural elements that I find so interesting and try to use in my own terms. Yeah. Thank you, guys.
Good. I have one last question, though. I wanted to steal Hans Ulrich Obrist's question. So, can you tell us about, is there one project that you really want to do or thinking about that you didn't have to, a utopian?
Well, I think Thomas' answer was so good. I mean, how can I top that?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.